Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to the ECM Podcast. I'm Caroline Fontanieu, and I'm very happy to host this series that will take you behind the scenes of new music on ECM Records. In this new episode, I'm meeting singer, composer, songwriter, and traveler Elina Duni to talk about her new album on ECM Records, A Time to Remember, produced by Manfred Eicher. Elina talks about images, sounds, exile, water, and love. First of all, I wanted to know if it was a given for Elina Duni to pick the same band as her previous project, Lost Ships.
Yes, it was obvious because on Lost Ships, I think we didn't play much together. Actually, we asked Matthieu to join us just some days before the studio. And we kind of discovered our playing together during the studio. And we were very, very happy with it. So A Time to Remember, I would say, has a more sound that is more round and that is fuller because we've been touring and we've been playing, so it changes the dynamics and the interaction, and it made sense to go on with this quartet because it was already a work that we started with Lost Ships. Then of course there are differences between the albums, but we can chat about this later if you want to.
We will. And we'll talk about the each and every single member of the quartet a little later, but that's interesting. So the quartet itself didn't really exist before the studio for Lost Ships, and then it got created in the studio time, but also like it evolved, it grew on the road.
I had a carte blanche at Moods, Jazz Club Moods in Zurich, and so I was playing with Rob and Fred in trio as we used to play, and then I decided to invite Matthieu Michel because I know him since a long time, and I've waited for a long time until I could find a project where I could fit him in, and this was really the perfect project. And this was February 2020, before the world collapsed and before we recorded the album. Some days before, and then I just wrote to Manfred, say, Manfred, can we please take Matthieu, because I think it's going to add a lot to this existing trio. Yeah.
And so the life and the creation and the growth of the band between February, March 2020 and July 2022, where I recorded A Time to Remember, you feel like the idea that you had, the perception, the conviction that you had for the vision that you had for this quartet made sense and was an obvious choice when it grew on stage, when it grew on the road?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it could have grown even more because it was the pandemic time, so we could not play as much as we wanted to. But still, also if we had a limited amount of concerts, this quartet grew. And because I think I just discovered that with this quartet, every song could be a film. Every song could have its own story to tell. And this is what I like about this new album, and I think it's more achieved than on Lost Ships. Well, makes sense because time has passed and we've grown. It's like I have the feeling that we could finally breathe all together in this album. It's like the four musicians are like a breath, the same breath. They're breathing in the same time. And also the arrangements and the way we interact with each other, it's very interesting actually, and it was very touching. But this has also to do with the magic of La Buissonne Studios and Gérard de Haro, and I've been working there since my first album on ECM, and the place is magical, and it also works its magic on the music.
Je serai face à la mer qui viendra baigner les galets.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this quartet. So how did you meet Matthieu first?
Well, I met Matthieu in Switzerland,
He's from there.
He's from Switzerland.
And you grew up in Switzerland as well.
I grew up in Switzerland, and I think it was at a concert with my old quartet, with Colin Vallon, Patrice Moret, and Norbert Famata in Bern. It was in a jazz festival we were playing, and we played this very beautiful song by Serge Gainsbourg, La Javanaise. We used to do a very special arrangement of this song. And then Matthieu came at the end, and he was like, wow, I never heard this song played like that, and I just love it, and I want to play it too. And it was like and this is how we met, and we kept on meeting in different circumstances, like jazz festivals or at the school where I used to be a student, and he was a teacher. So we kept and we just liked each other. We loved drinking some wine and talking about music, and I just loved his vibe, and I loved his music. And so yeah, I knew when I told him one day we will do something together, and this day finally came when I had this carte blanche in Moods in 2020, and I said, okay, that's now the right moment. We all felt it. It was so good. The music just lifted with Matthieu. Then we said, okay, it's going to be last minute, but we're going to ask Manfred if it's possible that Matthieu comes with us. And Manfred said yes, of course.
It's interesting what you're saying about like a horn. And flugelhorn is very like warm and rich sound, even more like embracing, even more present, even warmer than a trumpet. With the voice, and you have a very special quartet. You have no bass, you have no drums. It really complements each other. It's not canceling or walking over each other, which is probably a difficult exercise, but when it's with the right person, I guess it's more natural. So that's a great fit for sure. Let's talk about Fred. How do you know him?
I know him because Rob Luft used to play with him. Then it was 2018, and we had started working already together, and we were working a lot in duo format. And then we had a big concert. The first concert that we had in trio was in Elbe Philharmonie in the small venue. And then we wanted to find someone, but we wanted to find someone that was a kind of a painter, that could. And it's not easy to have a duo and then to try to make music with this duo, which our connection with Rob was already very strong. We have worked a lot on my previous repertoire, Albanian repertoire, as well as we had started to develop our own repertoire with compositions or with other covers. And we needed someone very special, let's say someone, I think we really needed a painter. And plus we really liked this idea that Fred could play several instruments, the piano, drums. So we just started, and we met at his house in London. We had the first rehearsal, and it was beautiful. It was exactly what we wanted. So, yeah.
And he's also a brilliant classical pianist. And there's something about Fred where he has a sense of melody that just brings so much to the table when he accompanies a voice, because there is something of like the sense of the melody is always put first. It feels there's really something that transpires when we hear you together. There's something, the real support of melody first. So you worked together through Rob, and then it was obvious to continue building the band with him. So that's really nice. And then Rob, your collaboration is fascinating. Like the way you write together, the way you compose together, the way you are a band within the band in a way, like I guess it's something that's pretty rare in life, right?
It's true. It's pretty rare. I had never composed with someone before Rob. If I used to compose something, it was by my own. So this was a big challenge, and at the same time, a big richness for both of us. Especially because Rob tends to be very sunny. He has a kind of very light and bright side, also in the melodies and chords that he finds. I tend to be more dark. So it's very interesting when we finally always have to find a kind of compromise and to meet somewhere in the middle. I think this is also what makes all this compositions so interesting, because it's a kind of balance, and we have to find this right middle, as we have both tastes that are really somehow so different. But Rob is, for me, someone that really can play anything, and any kind of music. And he gets so deep into the music, and he has no judgment about the music. So he can play tango as he can play free jazz, as he can play traditional jazz, as he can play atmospheric jazz, as he can play jazz rock, as he can play classical. So he has a kind of or Brazilian music, or suddenly sounding like a chifteli, you know, like a traditional instrument, a lute. So this was fascinating when I first met Rob, is his flexibility and his way of taking anything and making it his. You know, it's like he translates it into his own way, and it always sounds so right. And as well as a vocalist, to play with someone who gives you such a tapestry of sounds, gives you so much space and support at the same time, I think it's very rare.
Whispers of water, bubbles of...
You have an international band. You were born in Albania. You grew up in Switzerland. The whole repertoire is Albanian songs, American songbook, traditional music, things that you composed. So there's like really a sense of international, but beyond international, there's really the sense of travel. I think I was reading that you were really inspired by your trip in the Sinai Desert before composing or before getting into the studio. Is it other destinations that are the most inspiring thing, or is it traveling in your head that is the most inspiring thing?
Well, let's say that this trip, it was not only a trip. Actually, we lived there for several months, and it's a place where we are going back now since 3 years, since 2020. And it's a very special place because the desert is very special. It's also the Sinai Desert, you know, it's a place full of, let's say, spirituality. Moses, they say, used to walk there, and all these things. And the sea is amazing because it's full of creatures, the Red Sea full of corals. And we also learned during the time that we spent living there, we learned also how to free dive. So we were really into the water element, and we could really feel friends with the fish. And this is what Whispers of Water is about. It's about this magical feeling of being in the water. So it's a big change, you know, when you see that the big blue as something a bit scary, that you don't know what's really inside. And then when you learn to free dive and to see what's inside and to discover and to meet all these incredible creatures, they are aliens, actually, if you think about it. They are so different. So it was this whole experience of being in the nature, and this whole experience happened during the pandemic. So while Europe was totally closed and sometimes people could not even go into the park, we were walking in the desert and swimming in the Red Sea, and we were so close to nature. And actually, this is what helped us stay sane. This is what really made our souls not die, because it was such a strange moment for all of us. We didn't know what the future was made of. We didn't know, as musicians, when we would have a next concert. We had no idea. We were totally lost, and we didn't know much about our place also in society. Being able, having this chance to be somewhere so close to nature, I think we both, Rob and I, understood how profound this was and how deep, and how the way this nature was saving us somehow. So I think, apart from love and exile, which have always been present in my work, in A Time to Remember, nature is so important. Is the third element that really brings also everything together, and is the element where we use all the metaphors about life are there. Nature, and especially, let's say, the water.
Is it when you decided to entitle this album A Time to Remember, is it to remember this very time in the Sinai, or is it just like in general an invitation for the listener to remember the time where I don't know, nature was present, or like, is it about a special time in the calendar, or is it?
Yes. It refers to this pandemic where we had the feeling, I had the feeling that there was no more life, that life was just in the memories, and it was a time where we could only live with the memories. Everything else had stopped, but memories were still going on, and it was a kind of, we could live in the memories dimension. This is also why how I wrote the song, and I wrote it there actually, and this was my feeling when I was thinking about my life in Europe, or about my life as a musician, or as a traveler.
I just want to take a second to talk about ECM, your relationship with the label and your relationship with Manfred Eicher. You recorded in 2022. That was 10 years after your first album on ECM was released. How do you look at this relationship with ECM?
Well, you know, I first of all, I'm very honored to be a part of the ECM family. When I started the jazz school in 2008 in Bern, and then I started my old quartets, it was very clear to me. I said to myself, this will be on ECM. I don't know why I had the kind of,
Wow.
I said this will be on ECM because this is the only label where this music can be released. And my luck was that it happened actually 6 years after I had this vision. It happened also thanks to Colin Vallon, who was already on ECM, and then he told Manfred about the existing quartet, and then Manfred asked us if we wanted to record for ECM. So it was really it was like a dream, you know, come true. I remember I had this vision that I think this music is made for ECM, should be on ECM, and then this happened. So I was extremely happy and touched and honored, because some of my first ever jazz records were ECM records, and it's just how important this label has been and still is for so many jazz musicians around the world, and so many European jazz musicians as well, who could relate to it and to their own roots, without always having to relate to the jazz, to the American jazz. Yeah. So as I really felt this very deeply when I started jazz school, that I was a part of this European family with all this research that I was doing together with musicians on Albanian and Balkan songs. For me, it was obvious that if there would be a label, this would be ECM.
The relationship as a singer with a producer, I mean, it's very special. Like how much trust is needed to just I mean, for any musician, but like especially with a singer, you just like literally like giving your entire personality and voice to just like a producer who's just gonna make something out of it.
Yeah, and especially it's a label that never had many singers in it. I mean, you can count them on now it's a bit more, but 10 years ago you can nearly count them on your hand. So of course it was also a big responsibility, and I could understand it was a big luck, because there are not many of them. So, but actually everything, you know, what I really enjoyed with Manfred when I first met him, we were in the studio for Matan Malit, is that he could catch the magic of the recording. Like, he instantly knew this is it. And if we at some point would be lost in a take, or we were not so happy, he would say 2-3 words to guide us. And then we would make the magic happen. And as well, his happiness when we were listening, and he was like kind of dancing, you know, and like a child, this kind of, I was really touched by this, and very grateful as well to be able to be there with him and to see this. So what ECM helped, I think, with when we started recording, is that suddenly we were like playing a kind of different styles and different languages. Then ECM came and we had to focus on something and go somehow very deep into it. So this is why I said, okay, let's do an album only in Albanian from different regions of where the Albanians live, but only in Albanian. And it kind of focused the music, and it kind of went more deep and more essential. So I think this was thanks to ECM and thanks to Manfred that we did some of this work. And I'm very happy we did it, yes. And also because he believed in it, it was also the trust he had in us.
The music makes so much sense on this level. Like it's very...
Yes. The music comes first.
Now that you composed all this music and you read this music in so specific context, do you think you can still go back to write on your couch or just like in more of a normal setting?
This is what I'm doing now. I'm in my apartment with my piano, and I'm trying to compose here when historical things are not happening anymore, not the same way. Of course, I think it's also the creative process is a craft. It's a craft. You have to do it every day, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. Of course there is moments where you just feel inspired and you do it, but the more time goes by, the more I also understand that it's a work. It's how to know to get yourself into it.
It's a muscle.
It's a muscle. This is very clear to me now, and it's also facing yourself every time you do this, facing your limits, pushing them, and it's very challenging, and it never ends.
Merci, Elina.
Merci, Caroline.
Lost in clouds, my memories always appear behind the horizon. Bare castles at the rear, stolen moments, unspoken moments, soon become clear and rise like whispers to the sun.
Elina Duni about her new album on ECM Records, A Time to Remember. Thank you for joining, choosing, and listening to our ECM podcast. I'm Caroline Fontanieu, and I look forward to sharing more music with you in the next episode.